Hey, Islanders, and welcome to episode 78 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with a local Camano Island watercolorist. Please welcome John Ebner. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening. Hey, Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. We made it. We made it through 2020. So congratulations to everyone. But really, just big thank you to everyone. The podcast has grown quite a bit over the last year. And, that's all thanks to you guys for sharing it with your friends and listening. So I really appreciate everyone that's listening out there. Again, if you have any comments or questions or just want to say hi, I'd love to hear from you guys. You can email me at voice@camanocommons.com. So, yeah, I look forward to hearing from you guys. I hope you guys have a happy new year. Hope you guys have some goals set and some plans for the new year as we get moving this way. And I wanted just to remind everyone again, I will be offline for the next 2 weeks. I will be back with a new podcast starting January 26th. But as I mentioned in the last podcast, December is just a crazy month for me and my family. Our shop is super busy, so I don't see them a lot. So I'm taking a couple weeks off to hang out with the family. So I'll be offline for a couple weeks, but then starting January 26th, we will be back with new podcasts and new guests. So I just wanted to remind everyone on that. Anyways, but if you guys haven't already, you can always go back, check out all of the ones that I have done. If you haven't listened to all of them, there's quite a few of them out there. Almost been doing this for a year and a few months now. So quite a few podcasts. So be sure to check them all out. All right. Now, John Ebner. I've been wanting to get John Ebner on the podcast for quite a while. And it was kind of hard to chase him down. But finally he agreed to it. And I've been looking forward to this podcast for a while. John Ebner is an artist I've known about for a lot of my life because we've kind of partnered with him at the marketplace, and we do his tiles every here. And every year at the Christmas house, we have a set amount that if you spend that much, you get a free signed John Ebner tile. And they're amazing looking. They're so cool. And every time that we get to give one of those away, the people are just so overjoyed. They're so excited about them. They look awesome. It's a nice little surprise that they're at the end of their shopping, Christmas shopping. And so it's, I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. And so we got into all sorts of things of how we got into art in the beginning, why he chose how he ended up in watercolor. We also get into the debate of watercolor versus acrylic painting and some of that, and then how he's fused technology into his art as well. So we get into all of this and more. The other thing is he is our featured artist of the month for the month of January, up in the loft, which if you haven't heard already, that's the upstairs in the marketplace. So there's going to be a wall dedicated to John Ebner up here. And he's going to bring in either some originals or some stuff that he normally doesn't have in the marketplace. So be sure to come out to the loft and check it out. So it's a great opportunity to see some of the stuff that we don't normally carry. And so anyways, that's all for that. So without further ado, here's my conversation with John Ebner. Hey, Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with a local Camano Island artist. Welcome to the podcast, John Ebner.
Morning. How you doing, Brandon?
Good. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Sure. Should be fun.
Yeah. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about John.
Oh, about John. Okay. Well, I'm an artist, watercolor artist. I paint Northwest watercolors. I'm here on Camano Island and been here for about 23 years. I retired from my previous job and decided to move to Paradise, and here we are.
Very cool. Nice. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Oregon, Sublimity, Oregon. not many people know this, but this is where the Wright brothers' father taught school at one time for a while. He lived there for 3 years.
Okay.
But it's a little town about 15 miles southeast of Salem, Oregon.
Okay. Very cool. And then, did you grow up there the whole time through high school and everything?
Right. Yeah, I left home when I was 19.
Okay.
But yeah.
Nice. How was that growing up in like, so how, I guess, first of all, how big, like how small of town was this?
There were about 350 people there now. There's about 3,000 people now.
Okay.
But what it was like, it was unbelievable. And growing up on a farm, compared to the way the kids grow up these days, like our grandkids, really have no idea what it was like. We all worked every day. We all had our chores, but we hunted and fished. We explored. We rode horses all over the place. So it was just an incredible thing. It's totally different, I think, than the way kids grow up these days.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So then, when you were growing up and stuff, when did you kind of decide, or I guess, when did you get interested in art?
One of the things I can remember is one Christmas, Santa brought me a little coloring book. And it had the figures and things were made up of little black dots, like you see in the newspaper, the little black dots.
Yeah.
But anyway, you'd take a brush with water and put water over these things as if you were painting, and the colors would explode and it would color it. And I remember that, God, I thought this is just the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I thought it was so fun. So I left the Christmas tree and went into the kitchen and played with my coloring book the rest of the day.
Nice.
And I think that kind of sparked things for me a little bit.
Yeah. Very cool. So it just started with something simple. And how old were you when you got that?
Probably, I'm going to say probably 5 years old.
Okay, so super young.
Yeah.
Okay. So then as you were going through like elementary school and everything, how did that continue to develop, or was it something that you kind of shelved for a while?
It was kind of on the shelf, although in my later years, maybe 4th and 5th grade, was, I guess, my first little art class, and we did some, I remember painting daffodils and birds. And to me, again, this was just such an incredible discovery to see that you could create your own flowers and draw your own animals and birds. It was really exciting for me. And I had one teacher even that said, John, if you will draw a couple of birds for me or some flowers, I won't make you take the test today.
Wow.
Kind of nice. Yeah.
Very cool. So then, did you do much with art during high school and stuff then?
No, I didn't. I didn't really do a darn thing with it. It wasn't till after, I didn't do anything really until my wife was pregnant with our first son, John. And we used to smoke like crazy. And she says, we've got to stop this. And so we did. And we're kind of like, I don't know, going crazy. So to pass the time, she signed me up for a watercolor course at an adult education school in Kirkland.
Okay.
And gosh, I went there that one night, and we painted a few techniques and stuff, and I just couldn't believe it. I went home. I painted till 2:00 in the morning. I just could not believe how fun it was to add color to wet paper and watch it explode and watch it kind of do its own thing. Man, it was so exciting. So I took that class, and then later on, then started getting serious. Mm-hmm. And I took workshops from different people. One of them was a well-known guy in Redmond, Jerry Stitt, anyway, and we've been friends ever since. But stayed in touch. Um, so yeah, I've continued to study ever since that. I'm constantly taking workshops. I buy every book I can find of things that interest me. I'm kind of in a certain mode. Watercolors. Um, yeah, so I'm constantly learning, and I think the longer I do this, the more I think the more excited and the more. Uh, I mean, I definitely do not get bored with it. It's just the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm working on it all the time.
Very cool. So when you were during that class then, how did that kind of evolve for you then? Like when you were doing that class, did you feel like the other people in the class were experiencing the same thing, or did you feel like it was kind of different for you?
I think it hit me a lot harder than I think some of the other ones. I'm not sure. I think some people took it just to pass the time. But a little later on, then I started painting little small paintings. I didn't even frame them or anything. And a little gallery in Kirkland called me one day and said, "Hey, could you bring down some paintings and see if we can sell them?" So I took down about maybe 15 or 20 paintings.
Yeah.
And they just pinned them up, And a couple weeks later, she called me and says, "Hey, John, we sold everything. Can you get us some more?" So, talk about something that motivates you. And then a quick little story is later on, I ended up painting to an art show in Totem Lake, and it was the East Side Association of Fine Arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little nervous about doing that. I'm thinking, oh, my friends are going to say, "Well, who do you think you are putting your paintings out like that?" But I thought, you know what, I'm going to just give it a whirl, and maybe I can get into the show. So anyway, a few days later, a lady called me and she says, "Hey, Mr. Ebner, we wanted to tell you that you won first prize at our show." and it didn't dawn on me that it was true. I thought, I wonder who the heck is this, giving me this little story here. And then pretty soon I realized she was telling me the truth. So we are so excited, and we go to the show. And we're standing there looking at my painting, and there's people gathered, all around looking at the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we overheard one lady say, "My God, how did that painting win the first prize?"
Oh, no.
And so this was my first lesson in humility. and a tip for artists is, or for anybody, when you go to an art show, if you got something not good to say, don't say it, because the artist is probably hanging around listening to you.
Oh, that's very cool. So then, so you were doing you did the small store or the small gallery in Kirkland then. Mm-hmm. What kind of happened after that? You sold out to your first things, and then what happened?
So I continued selling it at the gallery, and then we decided to start framing things up and doing things better and getting a little bit more serious. And then eventually I was selling through the Kenneth Beam galleries, and he had a big gallery in Bellevue Square, one in South Center, one in Alderwood Mall, and one downtown Seattle. And man, that was fun because I was in there with some really big names. And so we'd have a show at each of those galleries 2 times a year, which really was a bit of a stress for me to, get all this stuff together. But Ken really helped put me on the map. And at the same time I was doing that, I was showing at the Bellevue Arts and Crafts Fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for maybe, I think, probably 12 years. And that was fun. And it was a super way to collect a lot of names for your mailing list, to meet a lot of people.
Yeah. Very cool. So how did you get in the galleries in Seattle and stuff? Did they reach out to you, or did you track them down?
I'm not brave enough to go up to a gallery and say, "Hey, I'd like to show my work." And if I did, I could guarantee you, galleries are so used to saying, "No, we've already got our people. Don't even bother showing us." That's kind of how it is.
Yep.
So I've never done that. But when I would be doing, say, the Bellevue Arts and Crafts Fair, people would come up to me and they'd see I was selling good, and they'd say, "Hey, would you be interested in working with our gallery?" And that's pretty much how we got. For a while, we were into about 70 galleries.
Wow.
With prints, and mostly had to do a lot of prints to keep up with that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I did it. I just am not brave enough to go up and ask them if they'd show my stuff. So I let them ask me.
Very cool. So then, what galleries were you in, like around this area, or how far out and everything?
Mostly Puget Sound area, but I had things down in Oregon and in California.
Okay.
So I didn't get out too far. And then to add to the story, I guess I was doing my show at Kenneth Beam Galleries. A lady came up to me and said, "Would you be interested in working with a national publisher?" And I says, "Yeah, I guess so. Nothing I ever thought about." Well, anyway, so she says, "I'm going to contact you after you get done with the show and all this." So, and it was Hadley House, a big publisher back in Minnesota. And so we flew back and signed a contract with them for 3 years. And what we found too, though, was my base is basically Oregon and Washington.
Okay.
Like I paint, Northwest stuff, so that's kind of why that works out that way. But anyway, so I stayed with them 3 years, and that was really fun. But I decided to opt out of that and just do my own publishing.
Okay.
And they did offset lithos. That's all they did. And I was doing a few giclée prints on my own, and I asked them, "Why you guys don't do these things? This is the way the market's going to go." And they never did get into it for a long, long time. I probably was doing it myself 5 years before they even started it. And anyway, where was I going with this? So doing giclées, and I bought a big printer, but I can print my own things. I can change sizes. I can improve them and use Photoshop to take out the specs and all that stuff.
Okay.
So I can get a print that looks actually better than the original did. And the great thing about them is they don't fade, and they're on watercolor paper. And but the advantage to me is it's not only that I save money by printing my own. The main thing for me is that someone can call me and say, "Hey, I want this particular print, but I need it in this size, and I need it tomorrow." No problem. I can just walk over to my computer, stick it on my machine, on my printer, and have it ready for them. Where before, I had to send it out, and I would get it back in 2 weeks. And, it's just such a time lag.
Yeah.
So this is probably the best thing I've ever done for my art type business.
Yeah. So real quick then, going back then, can you explain the difference between, and I might pronounce these wrong, offset lithos and giclée?
Yep, perfect. Offset litho, when I was doing those, it's printed on a machine that cost $1 million plus. It's a huge machine. And there's a lot of time in getting it set up, and it runs each color separately. And the paper is not as good a quality, nowhere near what giclée paper is like. And the thing is, on an offset litho, the artist has to print about 1,000 of them to make it anywhere worthwhile or cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
So now you end up with a stack that's about a foot deep. Now you got to store these things. Well, we have about 100 different prints. Well, storage was really getting to be a problem. Now that I do giclées, I can store everything in a series of drawers in my studio. I don't have to rent a warehouse anymore. And well, the advantage of a giclée is, number one, you have the ability to change sizes and you can tweak it and tweak colors and all that kind of thing with Photoshop.
Yeah.
Two, you can print one or two. I mean, it's kind of like you can print on demand instead of having this huge inventory. Three, they don't fade. The inks now, they say, will go approximately 300 years with no noticeable fade. The paper stays pure white. It doesn't yellow like an offset litho does, and well, they don't fade. So, I mean, the technology for these printers these days now is just unbelievable. And
Wow.
I can do everything in-house here now. I don't have to leave the house. I can do it all over the internet type thing.
Yeah.
So, is that more than you wanted to hear?
No, that's really cool. It's always fascinating to me how, I've always been super into like technology and how things advance and stuff. And as a kid, like I wasn't very artistic or skilled in that set, or even at the time really interested in it. As I've gotten older and started talking to artists and stuff, it's always interesting to me how technology and arts have continued to fuse. Like it's like the science and the arts are now being fused into and all working together.
You know, it's funny you mentioned how these two are fusing. On my computer, I got over 20,000 photos I take, and they're all good ones of scenery and family and all that stuff. But my latest project, I'm learning to use Photoshop and see some of the advantages you can do with that. So lately I've been playing, like, I'll take a photograph of a foggy, misty scene up along highway, the Pioneer Highway type thing, all those mist. But what I've been doing then is I've been painting herons and eagles and things like that. I paint them, then I put it in Photoshop and drop out the whole back. Then I put those in a file, and so I've got this photograph. I can drag that eagle into that photograph. So it's an eagle that I've actually painted on top, and combining a photograph and a painting together. So I don't know
very cool.
Go, I don't know where to go, but man, it is, some of the imagery I've been able to get is just so fun, so great.
That is really cool. Well, and the other cool thing about that is like, I don't know, like being able to combine those two things. Like that's super. I don't know. I'm really excited to see some of those.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes, but I think it's got a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, very cool. So then you were selling at a lot of different things, and then how did you end up in the Northwest, like in Washington Northwest? I guess we'll start there. How did you end up? So you were in Oregon. How did you end up here?
Good question. When I was in Oregon, my dad raised lawn grass seed, and when that stuff would pollinize in the summer, I mean, there was clouds of that pollen and dust, and I was so allergic, and I had asthma really bad. I'd end up in the oxygen tent every year. And
okay.
I had to give myself shots for this stuff all the time, and which makes me cringe when I think about it now. I hate needles. But anyway, so I after high school, I moved to Portland, went to an advertising art school, and I noticed in Portland, I seem to get a lot of relief from this asthma thing. And then I took my first job as a sales rep for a window covering company, and they transferred me up to Seattle. Otherwise, I'd probably never come here, but thank God I did. And then I find out up here I have almost zero problem with any asthma and all that stuff.
Nice.
So that's the reason I came up here. But in that window covering business then, I traveled a lot. I was a regional sales manager for a window covering company, and I covered Oregon, Washington.
Okay.
But I got to be out and see a lot of scenery, took a lot of pictures, and I paint small little beach scenes in the hotel at night, and just to keep myself involved in it. And I guess from there, well, you know the rest. We talked about the classes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you this quick little thing though. But when I was about 7, we used to go to the Oregon coast a lot, and we were down at Cannon Beach, and I was riding my bicycle down on the beach one time, and it was, I mean, the weather was really nice there, but it was early morning, and man, we were socked in fog. You couldn't see anything. And then as the sun came up, it turned all this fog just a beautiful orange glowing kind of a mist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm riding the bike in this mist. I am just enthralled with what's going on. But I noticed I couldn't see anything except, the color and all that, the mist. But I could hear, all the other senses. I could hear the seagulls and the crashing waves, and smell the salt water, and feel that cold mist on your skin and all that. And it was just a feeling that I will never forget. And I was riding around and I thought, man, this is the most incredible experience I've ever seen. And that feeling, I've just never gotten over it. I just, it kind of comes back whenever I see a scene that I'm just crazy about. And for some reason, I seem to be into this mist and fog all the time. It adds this kind of a mystery to a painting, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's my story, and I'm sticking to that.
Very cool. So then another question I wanted to ask you, just because I've talked with, I interviewed Jed Dorsey, who obviously does acrylic painting. Have you played around with acrylic, and what has drawn you to watercolor versus acrylic or oil or other version types?
Good question. Okay, good question. And this is something especially other artists would probably appreciate. But here's the deal. I painted with watercolors almost all the time. And I think watercolors compared to oil or anything else is just so, for me anyway, so much more fun and superior. But lately, I've been using almost exclusively acrylics, and I use liquid acrylics. And here's the reason. In a watercolor, if you want to do, say, one layer over top of another layer over top of another layer, each time you do that, it affects the layers down below a little bit. They're not real permanent, and they can move around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you do those layers of those glazes with acrylic paint, each one, that as it dries, it is permanent. It's not going anywhere, and you can't mess with it. It's permanent. So you can do all the layers you want without damaging the layers that are underneath it. And man, it gives you another freedom that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And then most people who do, like Jed, and most people who do acrylic use acrylic paint, thick and opaque, like you do oil paint. I don't do that. I thin mine down, thin and watery, exactly like you do with watercolors.
Okay.
And so to look at one of my paintings, you can't tell, or I can't tell, if it's done with acrylic or watercolor. The advantage of watercolor, though, is you can kind of manipulate some of those layers. I mean, you can lift it, lift out some and get the whites back and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the reason I've been doing that. And with the acrylic paints, I don't have a million colors. I just got the basic ones like yellow and blue and red, black and white, and a couple other colors, and green. But with those, I can mix all the colors I ever wanted to need with just those basic colors.
Yeah.
So I love using acrylics.
That's so cool. Well, and that's really interesting because you're you've basically created a hybrid of water and acrylic painting, and gotten a lot of the textures and the visualization of watercolor, but with some of those hidden benefits of the acrylic.
Exactly. So I'm always exploring and experimenting with things, trying to figure out here's the result I want. What do I have to do to get that? So that's kind of how I came up with that stuff.
Yeah, that's very cool. So then, how do you guys? So I guess, how did you end up finding about Camano then? You were down in Seattle selling window covers and stuff.
That's a good question. Hey, so here's what happened. I had to come up here one time somebody complained about one of their blinds, and so I had to come up and look at this house and find out what problem was and get it resolved. Well, so I came up here to the island, and I really hadn't been on this island. There's no business on it, and there's no reason for me to come here. But the home was out on Madrona Beach, so I came up in the late afternoon in the summer. The sun is setting. Oh, it was beautiful, and and it was shining on the Madrona trees. And then here's this little village that I didn't know was up here, and man, I thought, wow, this is awesome. So after I took care of the problem, I called my wife on the way home, and I said, "Hey, sell the house, we're moving." And so, but we did it. We ended up doing it. I ended up convincing her that this is where we needed to live, and that was a super move.
Wow.
On our part. Yeah.
Very cool. And then when did you start doing, so one of the things that I know you for, apart from you've been selling within the marketplace for a long time, but you have these really amazing tiles that you do, and then you do small ones and you do larger ones. When did you start that? How did you get started on all that?
Okay, I walked into a little store one day and I saw a display of some tiles, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool stuff. And so the lady that I would sell things to there, she said, well, the factory that makes those is just kind of around the corner here in Redmond. So I went straight over there, took a tour of the place, and thought, boy, this is something I think I want to do. And so we started doing small little coasters with my images. Well, I'd painted all these images already, so all these things were on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up doing a few, and my thinking was, first of all, I liked the way the colors became so intense, and I liked the shininess of them, and I liked the fact that we could. It was a way of getting, let's say, sampler type images of my workout, things that were fairly inexpensive for people to start out with.
Mm-hmm.
And then people would buy those, and then they'd hear somebody say, "Oh, I think I really like that tile," And anyway, things kind of grew from there. So it just gave me a lot of exposure. And we have sold thousands and thousands of these things since we started doing that.
Yeah, well, we love them, and like every year, it seems like you release a couple more into the mix, and every time you do, like, it's always neat to see how they turn out, and I think they're just really cool, and yeah, that they're at that really affordable beginner price.
And I got some new ones you're going to see pretty soon too.
Nice, very cool. All right, so I also wanted to touch on, you just did a documentary series thing. Can you talk about that, and what was it called, and how do people find it?
Okay, that was Jack Dorsey and his son Jason with us together, and it was a documentary on. They call us vintage. They don't call us old artists. They call us, but. The idea was to find watercolorists who have, added, how am I going to explain this here, have contributed to the art scene in the Northwest, I guess is what. Guys that have been around a long time and had some influence on the art business, I guess.
Yeah.
So, so they would find us old guys and bring us in and do a video and then write up some stuff and And it was interesting that when I go there, one of my favorite old teachers, Jerry Stitt, was also one of these old guys like me. So that was really kind of fun to see him there
Oh,
too.
fun.
And the guy's still painting like crazy, and I think he's about 80 something now, even older than me. But so, and you're asking how do you go there? I'm just drawing a blank now. I think if you went to look up Jason Dorsey artist,
Okay.
then you'll see something about vintage artist of the Northwest. Or you could probably just Google Northwest vintage artist.
Okay.
That might work too.
Very cool. And what I'll do is I'll try and find it, and then I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at one of my notes here. I just had to look up and see how long I've been doing this. I've been painting 46 years.
Very cool. Nice. Awesome. And then I also want to talk about, so one of the other reason we wanted to get you on the podcast too, was in January, you're going to be the featured artist for Upstairs in the Loft at Camino Commons.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that and what you're hoping to bring and everything.
I'm still working on that, but I'm thinking possibly I do some images on metal. I think I might bring a piece in that's done on metal. Then I might possibly bring in something done on canvas. I think I'll just bring in about 3 or 4, and I'll probably have an original of some kind there. Yeah. So I won't have a lot of room, but I'll have 3 or 4 things there for sure.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I've as I'm getting to know one more of the artist community on Camano Island, but 2 just become more and more involved within the business and working with my dad and stuff. I know your name has been one of the artists that I've known for ever since I was a kid. I've known that one, and so it's great getting to actually interview you and talk with you and hear your story of how you've gotten into art and everything.
Cool.
Very cool. So I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions. First of all, what is a purchase of $100 or less that you've enjoyed the most over the last 3 months?
I looked around this morning. Probably my little Alexa.
Nice. Oh, very cool. You seem like you like to stay up to date on technology and be able to utilize the newer things.
I like these toys.
Very cool. Pretend you have a friend coming from out of town to visit the island. What would their first day look like here?
I would probably take them around. I think I would take them up, probably up Pioneer Highway, go to Conway Tavern, have lunch with them. I would probably go down into Le Conner. Wood Merchant is one of my favorite stores in town, and they sell a lot of my things. A pretty incredible store in Le Conner. And just up through the valley, and then I'd probably take them, if we had time, down to Camano Island State Park and Kama Beach. And first of all, I drag them through all my yard and make sure they see all my landscaping and waterfalls. And we've kind of gotten into all that fun landscaping just as a second reason for people to come and visit our studio during the Mother's Day studio tour.
Yeah. That's very cool. And hopefully that'll be able to happen this year. We're still kind of waiting to see what happens.
We're kind of thinking maybe we might postpone it till summertime, like July.
Okay.
So that we're working on that.
Okay. And would that be a permanent move, or would that be a temporary move for 2021?
We think temporary. We'd like to probably go back to the Mother's Day time slot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that works really well. I think it's a great reason to bring your moms out and stuff like that and let them see a bunch of art and do things like that. It's a good weekend.
And for that weekend, we have about 3,000 people minimum in those 2 weekends that tromp through our house and check out everything. And so to me, that is so fun to meet all these people.
Yeah.
And, I was going to mention that the way we got started with the Sacramento art scene is when we came up there 23 years ago. Well, before we came, we used to do shows at our own house in Kirkland.
Okay.
And my wife loved to decorate up the house, and we had lights all over the place. It was a Christmas season, and we'd serve champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and man, it was so fun. And we had a friend wear a tuxedo and serve hors d'oeuvres and all that stuff. But so we accumulated a mailing list of about 3,000 plus, and those were only customers who had purchased something.
Okay.
So when we came up, we thought, hey, maybe we can kickstart this thing by plugging in our mailing list. And boy, it worked. And it was amazing that, like the second year we did this, restaurants ran out of food. It was just nobody was ready for the crowd that was to come up there.
That's awesome. So were you part of the starting of the studio art tour?
Well, it was actually started by 3 galleries on the island who actually got the idea to do this. We have been involved in this, though, right off the get-go. So for the whole, 20 or 21 years of this thing, we've been a part of it. Probably one of the few remaining old-timers,
The vintage.
Yeah, vintage guys, yeah.
Very cool. All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person in this community that I should interview next?
I don't know if you've talked to your neighbor, but I think Danny Kaufman is one of the most interesting guys I've ever talked to. He's an artist, but he's also he's activist, I guess.
Okay.
But he would be super interesting. Another person I think might be of interest to you sometime is my old buddy and neighbor from Kirkland, and his name is Ron Cooper. And he's been up here maybe 6-7 years, but this guy has gotten so involved in the art scene, and he helps me all the time with shows and all that. But he's involved in things like Camano Island Country Club, and just really does his share of things for the, to benefit the island.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. And lastly, if you could have a message on a billboard right on Camano Island as you're driving up, what would that say?
I think I would say, welcome to Camano Island. Enjoy our paradise.
Nice. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, John.
Yeah, well, this was fun.
Yeah. No, this was great. All right.
Well, I appreciate you thinking of me for this.
Yep. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to John Ebner for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And I will see you guys, not next week, but in a few weeks. So I am looking forward to that, and I will talk to you on the next one.